Thanks for joining us.
Talkline Network Radio, America's longest-running Jewish broadcast network, the voice of the Jewish community.
Welcome to the podcast. You are now tuned in to this episode of our podcast. Today, we are going to interview some of the greatest and most influential minds in our field. And now, please welcome your host.
You're listening to Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast on the air since 1981.
And we're back. You know, people know that Israel is a land of miracles, and one of the miracles that Israel is known for is making the desert bloom. But how do you get the deserts to bloom? How do you get plants to survive in the desert? Well, our guest right now is originally from England. Professor Simon Barak is an associate professor at Ben Gurion University, Jacob Blausen Institute for Desert Research. They are in the Negev Desert, and he's researched and focused on understanding the molecular mechanism of plant tolerance in harsh environments such as heat, drought, high soil salinity. He's a recognized leader in studying how plants are able to survive some of the world's harshest environments, like you find in the Negev Desert where the campus is located. He identifies genes that allow these plants to thrive, to engineer crops to grow in arid regions. He's also part of the international consortium that will help and attempt to grow plants on the moon. There's going to be a new attempt from Israel, the Beresheet Tues spaceship in 2026. He also, and this is close to my heart, he's established the Ben Gurion University radio. He's produced 2 movies, and he's discovered solutions for a sustainable future. And he's somehow, that's very much in the fabric of planting ideas and doing actual plants in all kinds of hostile environments. I think that's a good metaphor for Israel too. Professor Simon Barak, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Zev. Welcome to you. Thanks a lot for having me.
Thank you. So you're originally from England. I believe you moved to Israel about 35 years ago. I
did, yeah. I moved 35 years ago, 1990. I suppose it's a bit of a story how I ended up in Israel. I went to 11, you start high school at 11 in England, and I went to what's called a public school, which is a private school in England. If you've ever seen Harry Potter, and you've seen Hogwarts, sure. That's the school I went to. Exactly like that with the teachers.
Is that where you learned all your magic in Israel?
Exactly. That's exactly where I learned all the magic. Literally, the teachers had cloaks on them. It was exactly like that. And I was about a week there, and people found out I was Jewish. And from day one until I left 7 years later, every day, anti-Semitism.
Wow. From the teachers too?
Only less from the teachers. There was a few. I can remember one particular teacher who was pretty anti-Semitic, but it was mainly from the students. It was like, dirty Jew, you killed Christ. They would throw down the half penny on the floor and tell me to pick it up because Jews are stingy. So when you're 11, you don't really quite get what's going on. But after my bar mitzvah, I started to think about what it meant to be Jewish to me. And I read Solomon Greatzel's A History of the Jews, and I was like blown away by our history. And then my grandfather gave me the book Exodus by Leon Uris. And I was about 15, and I remembered I was on my parents' the floor of my parents' house reading this, and I came to the part of the UN vote, and particularly the Operation Magic Carpet, where they airlifted the Yemenite community from Yemen to Israel. And I just got up and said to my mother, "That's it, I'm making Aliyah." So that was my whole focus.
What did your parents say? What did your parents tell?
Actually, they were really, really supportive. They didn't give me, a hard time at all. They were very supportive. Maybe they wanted to get me out. I don't know.
Did they move too?
No, they didn't. I moved. My brother came a little bit later, but then he left. But yeah, I came on my own. I didn't know what I wanted to do in Israel. But my mother actually gave me another book, A Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, which was all about genetic engineering, and I thought agriculture, genetic engineering, and so that's how I sort of ended up in this field.
Wow. Now, were you the only Jew in your class?
No, in my year, I think there were 3 more Jews in the year. So 7 years. They're about 5% of the school was Jewish.
Wow.
Something like that.
And how did your parents, they try to do anything? Was there anything that could be done about the anti-Semitism? You lived with it on a daily basis for years.
I know. I didn't really talk about it.
You didn't tell your parents?
I didn't really tell my parents. So we just sort of got on with it. In the beginning, it was very difficult, but I think as soon as I found my Jewish identity, it just gave me strength, and I didn't really ever talk to them about it so much until quite a few years afterwards.
When you say Jewish identity, did you grow up with Shabbat or holidays? What was your religious environment like?
It was sort of, it wasn't religious. We lit candles on a Friday night, didn't have non-kosher meat at home. I had a bar mitzvah, went to local Jewish youth and community center. That was sort of about it. I really found my strong Jewish identity due to the anti-Semitism, actually.
Wow. And then made you move to Israel, and Israel become the richer for it, because you have some very innovative research that you've done. And I know Ben Gurion University is located in the desert. This Sde Boker campus is very special. Why would people come from Israel around the world to go to a college or university in a desert of all places?
Okay. So, well, I'm obviously from the Sde Boker campus. Maybe I'll tell you just very quickly what is on the Sde Boker campus, and then that's sort of going to bring me into why this is such a unique place. So, the university has 3 campuses. One in Beresheet, the main campus. We have one in Eilat and one in Sde Boker. In fact, the background you can see behind me is the location of the Sde Boker campus up over here on the mountain. So the Sde Boker campus has 2 main institutes. It has the Jacob Blaustein Institutes for Desert Research. Okay, and the Jacob Blaustein Institutes for Research, Desert Research has 3 institutes. They deal with water research. We have agriculture and biotechnology. And then we have environmental energy research, like solar energy, desert ecology. And when we have another institute called the Ben Gurion Research Institute for the Study of Israel and Zionism, which also houses the amazing Ben Gurion archives. If you ever come over and you love history, you will go there and just start salivating, because it's just the most amazing place. So, so the Sde Boker campus is really unique. First of all, we deal with some of the world's really challenging predicaments in food insecurity, okay, and we have 800 million people who live in a state of severe food insecurity, and we have a growing world population that we need to feed, so we deal with that. We deal with water problems of water supply as our water supplies dwindle, water supplies, protecting water, saving water. We have energy, clean energy like solar energy, and we also have a lot about the environment as well, such as desert ecology. And so that's one thing that draws students here, because we're really at the forefront of all those stuff. But I can think of 4 reasons, I think, why this campus is so unique. So first of all, the location is absolutely spectacular and beautiful, and it gives such an amazing atmosphere within the campus. The second thing is, you heard from what I just said, that it's very multidisciplinary. So we have lots of disciplines in a very, very small place. So that sort of leads to really weird and strange collaborations that you wouldn't normally get. So if I give you an example, we have Professor Wed Thurs. She deals with plant responses to being attacked by insects, which is a big, big problem for crop plants. And one day she met up with Professor Mohammed Beresheet, who's a physicist working in solar energy. And he deals with sort of sensors and solar sensors. And together they came up with a solution and an invention which allows them to detect early when plants are being attacked by insects. Okay, because plants give off gases and these sensors can test them. So these sort of collaborations wouldn't maybe normally happen, because of this small multidisciplinary campus. The other 2 things are, one of them is because all the students live on campus and the researchers all live in the village of Midreshet Ben Gurion, which is where the campus is located, the students sort of become like a family. The students and the researchers, they become like a family, and it's much more like a partnership than a normal student-researcher relationship. And I suppose also Israel's very informal, so they don't call us professor or doctor, they call us by our first names. That can be a bit awkward at the beginning for some of the international students. I mean, I'll give you an example. I had a Muslim student from India. So when he contacted me, I called him up in India and I'm talking to him and telling him all the prerequisites, and he's saying to me, yes, sir, no, sir, yes, sir, no, sir. So at some point I said to him, his name was Asif. I said, Asif, in Israel, we're very, very informal. You can just call me Simon. So there was like a small silence, and he said, yes, sir, Simon. So I became a knight of the realm within 2 seconds. So that's and the
when I first spoke to you, I said professor should call me Simon. So I guess that's part of the culture of Ben Gurion University.
Exactly.
Where you have formality and you have it's a warmer atmosphere. It says is what you're saying. It's in the desert, so it's warm, but it's a warm atmosphere too. You mentioned David Ben Gurion, by the way, and of course the university is named after the first prime minister of Israel. I believe he said that a Negev is the place where Israel's creativity and pioneering spirit would be tested. So I guess that's why you named the university after him, because you did test it. And we'll talk about the plants. I'm intrigued by how you're able to get plants to survive in all kinds of temperatures. But I think David Ben Gurion was an inspiration for the university.
There's no doubt about it. I think that for the researchers who are researching here, it's important for us not just to be doing cutting edge research, but be doing it actually here. I mean, I know it sounds cliche, but I really think that we feel like we're fulfilling Ben Gurion's dream. I mean, I think you just quoted that quote, that it's in the Negev where the creativity and pioneering spirit of Israel will be tested. I actually like two of his other quotes where he said, it's not enough to be up to date, you have to be up to tomorrow. And probably my favorite quote of his, which is a well-known quote, is when he said, if an expert tells you it can't be done, find another expert. And I think that's the spirit of his inspiration for the researchers here.
Our guest is Professor Simon Barak. I call him Professor Simon Barak. I know it's very informal at Ben Gurion University. Associate Professor at Ben Gurion University's Jacob Blauss Institute for Desert Research. He's a recognized leader in studying how plants are able to survive in some of the world's harshest and worst environments. He also is part of an international consortium that's going to bring and grow plants on the moon, part of a new initiative from Israel called the Beresheet Tues spaceship to 2026. And close to my heart, he's also in charge of the BGU, the Ben Gurion University radio station. He's also made 2 movies. I want to get to the heart of the matter. I'm intrigued by how do you get plants to survive in arid conditions, whether it's very hot or very cold? How do you make the desert bloom? What's your secret?
So there are several ways to do this. I'll talk specifically about what I do, but there are other researchers who work looking at new types of irrigation systems and new agricultural systems. I work on the
I think called plant tolerance, right?
Yeah, I work on the molecular side. So if we're going to grow, we need to grow more food. We need more land to do it in, because most of the land that is being used can be used by agriculture is being used, and what's left are desert areas. And these desert areas are characterized by what we call stresses. So we're talking about heat and drought and high salinity, and crop plants don't grow very well in these conditions. Okay, they're not going to give very good yield. So we need to improve the plant's tolerance to these very, very stressful conditions, the drought and the heat. And what my lab does is we try to find genes which are part of a plant's defense mechanism against these stresses, and that we can then manipulate these genes to make the plants more tolerant. So for instance, we use computational biology. We've developed a computational method of sifting through all the genes that a plant has. Plants have around 30,000 genes, and pinpointing those genes which are part of the plant's defense mechanisms against these stresses. And then we can manipulate them. So for instance, we have some genes that when we switch them off, the plants become more tolerant to drought and to heat and to salt. The other thing we're doing is we're looking at plants which naturally grow in these very extreme conditions. So we look at plants growing in the desert. We look at plants growing in very saline areas around the world. We even look at seagrasses growing under the sea, which they grow in very, very highly saline conditions. And we ask, what genes or what mechanisms do these plants have which allow them to survive, and that we could then transfer into crop plants that would allow them to then grow in, for instance, desert areas.
You also deal, I'm sure you do, with very cold conditions. I guess the same theory should work for that as well.
Well, it's interesting. It's actually a very good question, because very often when you make plants tolerant to one particular stress, it actually makes them tolerant to multiple stresses. And for instance, cold is one of those that's usually affected, and that's good for the desert, because in the desert in the day it's very hot, but at the night it can get really, really cold. You can have these big temperature swings. So that's a very good trait for a plant to have is also cold tolerance.
I'm intrigued by space. I know that you're part of an international consortium that's going to plant plants on the moon itself. Tell us about that. How has that come about, and what is that going to be like?
So this is like, we're super excited about this. I was actually approached by Australian who was starting an international consortium. They asked me to lead the biology group because of our expertise on plants living in extreme environments. So I lead a group of researchers from Australia, from the Millennial Seed Bank in Kew Gardens in Britain, and from University of Cape Town in South Africa. And what we're trying to do is we want to, as I say, we want to grow plants on the moon. You might ask me, why do you want to grow plants on the moon? Right?
Yeah, what benefit will it have to us on Earth?
Yeah. So you will hear a lot about having communities on Mars. We hear Elon Musk talking about it a lot. The UAE have a big program. We have the NASA Artemis program, which wants to put communities on the moon and also have a space station, a way station above the moon. And if you're going to have communities in these on Mars or on the moon, we need to grow plants. So we need to grow plants for food, obviously, but also maybe to contribute to producing oxygen or to taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, maybe for medicinal purposes. And so it's important to be able to grow the plants in a human community on the moon. Now, they've tried to do this in the International Space Station. So they have grown plants in the International Space Station, but there's a big problem. The space station has no gravity, or only microgravity. So, plants can sense gravity. That's why a shoot grows up and a root grows down. Now imagine what it's like in no gravity. It just doesn't know where to grow. So it grows in all these weird shapes. And sometimes many of the plants just don't survive. On the moon, we have about 1/6 of the Earth's gravity. So we're hoping that the plants will be able to grow on the moon. So basically, we're sending the plants up in a chamber, which will be sealed with Earth's atmosphere. And it will have sensors in there. It will have a camera that can image the plants. So that's how we're putting them up. And we have very special species as well that we're sending up as well. Very special plant species.
But you're not going to be going yourself, right?
I would love to go. I would love to go, but unfortunately, the first chamber is only 500 grams. Don't think I'd fit into 5. I'm on a diet, but don't think I'm going to get. Don't think I'm going to get that thin. Yeah. So no.
Would that be called a plant-based diet?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I don't think I'd be able to live on what they were sending up as well. So we're sending up two types of plants. We don't have very much time on the moon. Once we land, we only have maybe 6 or 7 days of power. So we have to choose plants which seeds germinate very, very quickly, and the seedlings grow very quickly. And we're also using another type of plant called a resurrection plant. So these are plants you can dry down to almost dry. When you give a little bit of water, the leaves literally come back, they expand, they're green. And so we're using those type of plants on the surface of in the chamber on the surface of the moon.
Yeah, there have been some reports that on Mars, they think there may be some bodies of water underneath. Is any plans to also look at Mars? Well,
for our stage, we're just taking the first step. So obviously we can't yet send plants to Mars, or maybe you can, but you need to take care of them. So we're taking this first baby step to the moon, which is an enormous step, even though it's a baby step. And then we'll see what happens on the moon. And that will hopefully have implications then for Mars.
What about, I know Israel's made strides in, let's say, kinds of tomatoes where they can recreate that, and other fruits and vegetables. Is that something of your research as well?
So I only have one project which actually deals with crop plants. The main plants I deal with, they're sort of like the guinea pig of the plant world. So, if you research animals, you use mice or rats or humans, right? So we have the guinea pig of the plant world. And this is called a model plant. I use that plant and then its relatives, which are very, very, live in extreme areas. So I mainly use the model plant. The one project I do have is we're trying to use our technique of this computational method to detect genes and then manipulate them by what's called gene editing, which is not considered a genetically modified organism, a GMO. And we're trying to create salt-tolerant rice. So we're doing this with a commercial Ag and Tech Fund, who are helping us fund, and the Israel Ministry of Agriculture.
For a while, there was a lot of talk about genetic modified food. Is that still on the horizon where people are really taken to different levels?
So, there's a lot of, when all this GMO came out, it was a lot of misinformation.
Because people say, no, you shouldn't buy foods that GMO, right?
Well, the thing is, everything you eat is genetically modified. We've been doing it for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. We've just called it breeding, right? So this is a new technique where you would take one gene and you'd put it into the plant, and you'd make, you'd get a new trait. So there's a lot of misinformation going around. But nowadays, we don't use the old techniques that were being used. We use something called gene editing. And with gene editing, you're not introducing a foreign gene into the plant. So it's not considered a GMO. I should say, actually, that it's quite funny if you think about the GMOs, because if you think about people who have diabetes, right, they need insulin. So how's insulin created? They take a human insulin gene and they put it in bacteria. And they use the bacteria as a factory to make the insulin. So GMO, as far as bacteria, are okay, but suddenly GMO in plants are not okay. So, as I say, there's a lot of misinformation that have gone on about that, about GMOs.
I'm intrigued because we're on the radio. Is that you also in charge of BGU Radio? Tell us about what that's all about, how you got involved with it. And I'm just amazing because I know you made radio grow in the desert.
So first of all, I think it's very important to say that I'm not the person who's in charge. I set it up with, he was then a student here. His name is Dr. Raviv. He was a PhD student here in biology. And the local council had wanted to set up a regional radio station and ran a radio course. He did it. They never set up anything. And he thought to himself, well, we have this amazing campus. I didn't tell you, but we are the most international campus in Israel. We have 50% students from all around the world. And we have all sorts of culture here. We have the amazing scientific stories and the BG and the archives. And he said, why don't we start making some podcasts? So he just got a little microphone and a computer, started making a few podcasts, about 3 podcasts, and he told me about it. I was blown away and I joined. When the year ended, we sat down, we said, this could be absolutely amazing for the university. So we talked to the university, put in a proposal. We got our first grant, set up our first studio in the Stebelcare campus, called ourselves SB Campus Radio. And we were making lots of podcasts. And then the new president came in at the time, Professor Danny Chamowitz, who he really understands PR. He really understands the value of radio. And we brought him down and we talked to him and we said, we've got to make this into BG Radio. So he really supported us. We now have a brand new studio beautiful studio in the main campus. And I'll just tell you a couple of things we do, because we do really unique things that other radio stations don't do. So obviously our bread and butter is podcasts about our research, about student life, about all sorts of different subjects. But we also have really entered the educational fabric of the university. So for instance, we offer different courses, alternative exams. So instead of students doing a written exam or doing a PowerPoint presentation, they come and make a narrative podcast. One of our group of students who did this, they invited the president of Israel, Isaac Herzog, down, and he came down and he was part of it. We also run podcast production courses for academic credits. And one of the really important things we do is we do community outreach. So I'll just give you one example. We go to primary schools in Beersheba, particularly in areas which are low socioeconomic areas, and we help the primary schools set up their own radio stations. And we know from the teachers that the children who have been participating in this, all their reading and writing has gone up. And we also, of course, did a lot of activity during the war. So, there were a lot of kids who were families who were evacuated from the Gaza envelope communities and from the north. So we took our portable studio down to the Dead Sea, where many of them were being held, to the Dead Sea hotels, and we ran podcast production with the kids there. So yeah, so that's the BG Radio, yeah. But Dr. Raviv is now the director, the full-time director of BG Radio.
Terrific, and it operates 24 hours a day.
We have live radio as well, 24 hours, yeah.
Terrific. That's wonderful. I really enjoy that. So you're planting lots of different seeds.
Absolutely. Trying to communicate what we do and what we do in the desert and what Ben Gurion University does, yeah.
If people want to learn more information about what the Ben Gurion University is up to, how can they do so?
Well, first of all, they can go into our websites. If you're in America, you can contact Americans for Ben Gurion University, our main support organization.
So I'll give that phrase, the number 4bgu.org.
Yeah. Yeah, Americans for Ben Gurion University. Yeah.
And if you want to see what it's about, on Wednesday, May 7th at 12 noon Eastern time, they will have a special tour about remarkable resilience, and you can go to a4bgu.org/remarkable resilience to get that information.
Exactly. And of course, if anybody wants to know what's going on in the Stapleton campus, I'm always happy to speak to anybody.
That sounds great. I'm just, are you going to get in touch with Elon Musk about maybe having a bigger spacecraft to go to the moon so you can do the planting yourself, or some future point? That may be an interesting idea.
It is definitely something we've spoken about. Yeah, definitely something we've spoken about.
Anyway, I want to thank you for joining us. Amazing work. Professor Simon Barak, Associate Professor, Ben Gurion University's Jacob Lawson Institute for Desert Research. He's a specialist in dealing with plants and harsh surroundings and conditions, whether it's a desert, whether it's hot or cold. He's also inspiration for the BGU radio station, as well as making 2 movies. Thank you for joining us. We hope you join us again for a future broadcast, and keep on what you're doing. It's so important because it helps the world, where people could get life-sustaining nutrition in even arid conditions, and that's based on what you're doing. So thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you very much, Zev. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to
Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast, the pulse beat of the Jewish community.
For continuous Jewish programs, TalklineNetwork.com, or our 24-hour-a-day listen line at 641-741-0389. For past shows, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, Instagram, and all major podcast platforms, or jewishpodcast.org. Thanks for listening to the TalklineNetwork.com.
Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Great job. I enjoyed our conversation.